Let me guess, you probably know some JavaScript basics, but after that, it becomes less obvious what to learn next. Maybe you've heard of TypeScript, or exciting front-end frameworks like React, or some really advanced JavaScript concepts, stuff like closures, event loop, or asynchronous code. In this video, I will explain all of them. And I know some of this might sound intimidating at first. These are advanced concepts, but when you see them explained the right way, they are actually easier than you think. So let's learn all of that in the next few minutes. My name is Fabian, and you're watching Coding to Go. Number 1, basic programming skills. Here, it really depends on if JavaScript is your first programming language, or if you already know how to code, but just with a different language. Without prior experience, you first have to learn about if statements, loops, functions, and everything else you see on the screen. But if you know that already, I would not waste much time here and only check for differences in the syntax. Much more important in the JavaScript basics are the things that are fundamentally different to other programming languages. Unique JavaScript concepts. And the first one would be how JavaScript handles data types. JavaScript is dynamically typed. That means you don't lock in a type up front. A variable can start as a number and later become a string. That makes JavaScript feel fast and flexible, because you can write code without a whole lot of setup. But it also makes bugs more likely. Sometimes a value isn't the type you expected, and you only notice once the code runs. JavaScript also does some automatic type conversions in the background. A value can behave like true or false inside a condition, even if it is not actually a boolean. This is called type coercion. Sometimes we want to use that, but some developers just don't like how open-minded JavaScript handles data types, as it can be a potential cause for bugs in your code. And this is the reason why TypeScript became so popular, which is the next concept of this video. TypeScript is basically JavaScript, but with types added on purpose. You can say this value must be a number. This function returns a string. This gives your code much more structure, and it helps catch mistakes earlier. For example, if you pass the wrong kind of value into a function, or try to access a property that does not exist, TypeScript can warn you while you're coding. That is because TypeScript does not run directly in the browser. It first gets compiled into normal JavaScript. So the browser still runs JavaScript in the end, but TypeScript improves the development experience before that. It does not replace JavaScript, but it helps you write safer JavaScript, which is also the reason why I am improving my TypeScript skills using boot.dev, who's kindly sponsoring this video. And let me tell you what they do is pretty awesome. On boot.dev, you will find courses on JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, Go, and much more. And the best thing is, the way you learn is not just by reading and listening. Instead, you actually get some active coding experience. I mean, just take a look at how this lesson teaches us TypeScript. On the left side, we get some explanations, such as TypeScript has static types. And if a value doesn't match a type, it will throw an error when it compiles. Now, our assignment of this lesson is to fix the code example on the right. What do we need to change to make it work? We can see the type specified is number, but the message is a string. So let's change the type to make it work. We can run the code and submit the solution. And just like that, we get XP and can move on to the next lesson. I really like this way of learning. You get the theory, but also active coding practice. And the way they have designed this website makes everything feel like a game. And the best thing is, you don't have to pay anything to start learning. All the course's learning material is free to read and watch. But there's a paid membership for those who want these interactive exercises, progress tracking, and helpful AI features. So if you want to improve your skills, I highly recommend that you try it out yourself by scanning this QR code or using the first link in the video description. And if you use my coupon code, you will get 25% on the entire first year. Now let's talk about higher order functions. A higher order function is simply a function that takes another function as a parameter, or returns a function. This works because in JavaScript, a function is just a normal value. You can store it in variables or pass it to other functions. JavaScript uses this idea everywhere, for example with array methods like forEach, map, or filter. Let's look at filter. With filter, we pass a function that decides which element should stay in the array. For example, keep all products under $500. Filter then returns a new array with only the items where the condition is true. That is the power of higher order functions. They let us pass logic around as values, a pattern used heavily in modern frameworks and libraries like React. Another concept many beginners struggle with is closures, but the idea is actually simple. A closure is when a function is defined inside another function. This allows the inner function to access variables from the outer function, even after that outer function has finished running. Closures are useful to encapsulate logic in variables. But why do we use them? If you write all your logic in the global scope, it can be accessed from anywhere. So a user could simply open the console and manipulate your variables. But when you use closures, you can hide those variables, and then you control how they are accessed. For example, through specific functions. So the data stays private, but the functionality stays public, allowing the rest of your program to interact with your variables using these functions. So that is one way to encapsulate your data. But today you can also use modules for that. Modules allow you to split your code into multiple files. To create a module, you simply create a new JavaScript file. By default, everything inside that file is private. But if you want to use something in another file, you need to export it. You can export your values individually, or use an export list at the end of the file. But you can also have one default export per module. This will affect how we import these values in another file. To import values from a module, we write import from and then the file. Named imports must be written in curly braces. But for the default import, you can choose any name you want. Now, to actually use modules in the browser, you need to add the type attribute to your script tag and set it to module. And that is the basic idea behind JavaScript modules. It allows us to organize large JavaScript applications into smaller files. We can define and export a function in one file and import and use that function in another file. Another huge topic is objects. To create an object, we use curly braces. Inside the object, we can define key value pairs. But objects can also contain functions. These are called methods. Inside these methods, we often use the this keyword, which refers to the object itself. The exact value of this depends on the context. For example, in the global scope, this refers to the window object. But inside an object method, this refers to that object, which allows us to access its properties. JavaScript also lets us manually control this, so we can bind a function to an object. Now let's talk about prototype inheritance. Objects can also inherit behavior through the prototype chain. Every object in JavaScript has a prototype. If a property isn't found on the object, JavaScript looks for it in its prototype. You can see this concept a lot. In the document object model, many DOM properties we use, like inner text or add event listener, are not actually defined on the element itself. They are inherited through the prototype chain. That is how most DOM elements share the same properties and methods. However, setting the prototype can be very tiresome. I mean, writing code like this may seem a little bit unusual, especially when you come from other programming languages. And that is why modern JavaScript introduced classes. Classes provide a cleaner syntax for creating objects. This looks much more familiar for many developers. But under the hood, JavaScript classes still use prototype inheritance. So classes are mostly just syntactic sugar for prototypes. Another huge concept in JavaScript is asynchronous code. JavaScript is single-threaded. It can only do one thing at a time, but our apps do slow things all the time, like API calls, database requests, or file operations. If JavaScript just waited for each of those to finish, your page would completely freeze. So how would we avoid that? The answer is the event loop. Normally, JavaScript executes your code line by line. This happens on something called the call stack. Functions are pushed onto the stack, executed, and then removed again. So everything runs synchronously. But what if you want to have a slow operation, for example a set timeout? This is asynchronous code. In that case, JavaScript hands the task to the browser APIs, where it runs in the background. Meanwhile, JavaScript continues executing the rest of the code on the call stack. When the set timeout timer finishes in the browser APIs, its callback is placed into a queue. Now, what exactly does the event loop do? Its job is simple. It checks if the call stack is empty. If it is, the next task from the queue is pushed onto the stack and executed. So the event loop constantly checks the stack and the queue. This is how JavaScript handles slow operations without blocking the page. And a simple way to write asynchronous code is with promises. A promise represents a value that you don't have yet. It comes from an asynchronous operation, which means you have to understand promises if you want to work with APIs or a backend system. A promise has three possible states. When it is still doing something, it is pending. After the operation finishes, it is either fulfilled or rejected. But how does the syntax of a promise look like? The promise constructor takes one argument, a function. This function is called the executor. The executor receives two parameters, resolve and reject. We can call resolve when the operation succeeds. So if we actually had some code here, we could create a simple if statement to check if the operation was successful. For simplicity, our operation would just be a simple 5 plus 5. Now, if the operation was successful, and the answer is actually 10, in that case, we want to resolve the promise. So we call resolve. Else, if it wasn't successful, we have to reject the promise. So call reject. Inside this function, you can send something too, like a simple string. Now we can attach a reaction to this. We want to react differently depending on whether the promise was successful or not. And for that, we can use then and catch. We take our promise and call .then on it. Inside then, we get the value that was passed into resolve. So this string right here, we can call it message. So this console log happens if everything worked. In here, you could update your web page, return some data, or even trigger the next step in your logic. Now, to handle the case when something went wrong, we use .catch at the end of the promise. Inside catch, we get whatever was passed into reject. In our example, that's the rejected string over here. So it is also a message. In case of an error, we could just show an error message on the console. So let's try this out. When 5 plus 5 is 10, the operation will be successful, and the promise is fulfilled. Now, if you make a mistake on purpose, the result won't be 10. Then the promise will be rejected. So the code in the catch block happens, which is the error on the console. Now, of course, the response doesn't have to be a text message. You could also return complex data, like objects, for example. Now, even though our current example isn't truly asynchronous, it's perfect to understand the syntax. You can imagine whenever we do an asynchronous operation, like calling fetch, then something very similar will happen behind the scenes. This fetch call will make a request to an API. The function returns a promise, which is fulfilled with a response object representing the server's response. So, on that promise, we can do the same thing as before. We use then and catch to do something if it was successful or not. Then runs when the promise is fulfilled, and catch runs if it is rejected. There's also finally. This runs no matter what, no matter if the promise succeeded or failed. Now, this then catch finally syntax is just one way to handle promises, because modern JavaScript also introduced async and await. This is a newer way to write promise-based code. Whenever you put the async keyword in front of a function, it means this function always returns a promise. If you return a value, JavaScript automatically wraps it in a resolved promise. If the function throws an error, it becomes a rejected promise. And very importantly, we need the async keyword in the function declaration so that we can perform an asynchronous operation with the await keyword inside that function. You put await in front of a promise. For example, fetch. This will pause the execution of that function until the promise is settled. Now, an important detail is it does not freeze the whole page or block the main thread forever. It just tells JavaScript, when this promise is done, continue here with the value. So in this example, we have 3 console logs. A is happening before we await the promise. B happens when the promise is resolved. And C happens after the code in the function. But if we test this code and look at the console, you will see the order A, C, B. So while we're still awaiting the value, the rest of the code down here can still happen. So first A happens, then we await the promise, in the meantime C happens, and when the promise is resolved, B can happen. Now, if a promise rejects, await will throw an error. And that is why we usually wrap await calls in a try-catch block. In the try block, we do something asynchronous, like awaiting a promise. And in the catch block, we handle any errors. It's the same promise mechanics under the hood, just written in a way that reads more like normal synchronous code. Now, the JavaScript concepts of this video were pretty advanced. So if you want to keep improving with more hands-on coding practice, check out boot.dev, who sponsored this video. And if you want to keep learning with me, watch this video right here, where you get the first hour of my JavaScript course completely for free. My name is Fabian, and this was Coding to Go.